Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for jumping in and joining us today. My name is Dan, and I am absolutely thrilled that I'm joined today by Sam Auty. Sam is a manager in the PwC Australia New Law team, which specializes in legal transformation and helps to lead New Law's automation team that works in the in-house legal teams across a bunch of different industries on their automation journey. These industries include things like healthcare, food, retail, professional services, and of course, a bunch of different law firms. Sam also specializes in broader legal transformation projects and has worked across the Asia-Pacific region with legal teams across improvements and legal technology projects. Prior to joining the New Law team, Sam led the testing and the implementation of a subscription service for New Law firm and provided legal project management and process improvement expertise on large commercial matters for Ash's clients managing complex work streams and budgets. Sam's expertise is incredible in these areas, and I'm super excited to dive in today. On her personal time, Sam volunteers at Annika Legal as the head of the user experience team, leading user experience testing in their legal advice services. Sam also is on the board of the Australian Fencing Federation and shares her experience as an ex-elite athlete as co-chair of the High Performance Program. Sam, I'm super excited to have you in today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Dan. I'm super excited to be here today, and welcome to the webinar, everyone.
For everyone who's just jumped in, we're going to be unlocking the secrets of legal automation through Sam's ridiculous background and experience today. And we're going to be taking a bit of a stab into both how the PwC team use legal automation and think about legal automation, but also how the plethora of different engagements that they're involved in has sculpted their incredibly expert level understanding of all things legal automation. Before we dive in, Sam, can you give us a bit of an overview of the New Law team? What's it all about? What does it look like? Who are the people involved? And what are the main focuses?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan. So in my team, we provide legal technology and consulting solutions to the legal industry and in-house legal teams. So the team I lead specifically is focused on automation and uses the Checkbox platform to help PwC teams and our clients automate documents and workflows. We also work in other areas of technology, particularly emerging, like generative AI. We've always got our finger on the pulse for that kind of work. And our role is really to support clients and the teams we work with through their automation journey, from identifying use cases to go live and app iteration as well. In terms of the way that our team is structured, so we do provide agile style support and implementation. So there's a lot of things that you may see in like a more traditional software development environment that our team, even though we're in a consulting business, takes on. So that's things like having product owners. So we're making sure we're representing the voice of the client, having scrum masters and project managers, having our developers who are building in the Checkbox environment, and a lot of things like daily stand-ups, sprint retros, all of those kind of things you may have heard of from a development environment. Really, the idea is that our team is structured so we can respond to changing needs and priorities of the clients that we work with.
That's awesome. Sam, I think the breadth of that intersection between traditional and really effective product delivery and then that law expertise is incredibly useful. High level, let's start with the why of legal automation. So why it's important, how it leads to process improvements, and what implementing technology looks like in this space.
Yeah, I mean, the why is such a great place to start. And honestly, when I talk about the why of automation, we talk about things like the human experience, like the frustration of having a slow or inefficient process. And this sort of goes to the heart of why you'd want to start on an automation journey. And it's things like all of those little annoying things that you would have day to day, like, oh, I've got to copy this information from one system to another. I've got to send this document attached for signing, or I've got to sign it and scan it and send it back. All of those little things are the reason why you would look at automation, right? So they're really the human experience of an inefficient process. And when we think about automation with our clients, like the focus is on this frustration. In a consulting world, we talk about like the pain points in your day-to-day process. It's really the frustration, like your human experience of that. And we want to get to our clients, imagining a world where there is an easily accessible paper trail, right? Signing and approvals are done automatically without email chains, and they've got a clear record of the work that they've done. It's all easily accessible. All of those things, we want them to imagine that future without that frustration. And really, like, where we want to get to as well, particularly in legal automation, is it's not just about creating documents faster and easier. That's definitely part of it. But it's also about improving the quality, consistency, and the compliance aspects of legal work, which can also lead to ultimately enhancing customer experience and satisfaction, right? Like if your clients, you're talking about a sales process, for example, which has contracts, at the end of the day, it's your clients as the end user of that. And making that easy, both for yourself, but for your clients, helps improve that experience as well.
Sam, that's super, super amazing. I really love the approach from the human experience side of things. And we talk about human experience in a neutral sense here, but actually everything that you mentioned is kind of negative. They're frustrating parts of what is actually a really complex and really high value part of a business. So you get bogged down in these things that need to get done, these emails and these reviews and these chasing bits and pieces that ultimately take the human out of the ability to elevate that work and to really enrich and become a valued partner of a business. It's incredible. I really love that start of the human experience. Conceptually, it sounds amazing. I'm bought in. I'm ready to go. Let's go legal automation. In practice, the what and the who, like there's a bunch of different ways to think about this. There's a whole bunch of different spanners and wrenches and toolkit. There's a whole bunch of different levels of penchant within stakeholders internally, within in-house legal teams, their broader business stakeholders, as an example. So taking it one level down, the what and the who, how do you approach thinking about, or how does PwC approach thinking about these sorts of things in regards to more of a transformation aspect?
Yeah, so with taking a broader approach, the first step in that sort of what element is identifying what your use cases are for automation, right? So we go through and we identify what are all of the opportunities in all of the processes that you have to automate certain steps or to automate documents. And we'd prioritize those as well. And it may depend on what the client priorities are as to how you want to prioritize the different use cases that you have. But a lot of time we look for things that are high volume, they're lower value work or like lower complexity. There's going to be a much higher return on investment or value or a much larger impact for starting with that use case first, compared to something that's maybe like lower volume or it's like higher complexity. So we go through, okay, what's all of our pain points and what are the opportunities here for automation, prioritize them with that lens. And then what you're doing is once you have those use cases, you know which ones you want to start with. That's sort of when you combine the what with who. So that's where you're going, okay, this is our use case. Let's have a look at how this works end to end in our business at the moment. So what is the end-to-end workflow of the team? And as part of that, you identify who is doing what in that journey. And that's really important because when we're talking about in-house legal teams, even when we're talking about law firms, it's never just the lawyers in the process. There's the sales team they might be working with, there's ICT, there's all of the approvers that they might have to work with as well, COO, general manager, all of those people. And if you're going through for that use case end to end what that process is, you get to identify who is part of that. And that's really important. The other thing about starting with that is you can identify which teams you want to engage with really early. We always upfront recommend engaging with your ICT team really early when you're thinking about your automation journey. So you can get their buy-in, like they're always a really important stakeholder, but then you're also engaging with the different business teams as well.
Amazing. Yeah, I think notable exceptions here. We haven't talked about tooling. We haven't talked about like whether my tool will solve for this use case, and we haven't talked about feasibility of the tools on the table, because at the end of the day, you don't really want to massage your business processes into the tools. You want to find tools that are appropriate to solve for your business use cases. So I think really, really pragmatic and beautiful place to start there. From there, I guess, what does it look like in terms of gaining buy-in from those business stakeholders? So you can identify them, but then what next? Because obviously they have their own priorities and they don't often involve legal efficiencies.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for a lot of teams, getting business stakeholder buy-in is like the most daunting step, right? And you start to go into conversations about like whose budget, and that can become really difficult. One of the easiest ways that we've found to get buy-in is starting with a prototype or proof of concept app. So almost like a mini app, something where you're able to show the use case instead of describe the benefits. And what you're really doing here is like how much easier is it to get buy-in if you're able to show how easy it is compared to the current process. And that can work really well. And what we found with these conversations with business stakeholders is it goes to discussing how the prototype can be improved in that discussion. And that's great, because instead of going from a no, we don't want to change and having that as the perspective, you've straight away gone to, oh, let's improve on the prototype, which is your next step anyway. So it can work really, really well to get buy-in. I think one of the other ways in terms of broader business buy-in is starting with something that is simple, which is why we use that sort of low complexity, high volume lens for prioritizing your use cases. And that can be something that really helps you to stick to like an 80-20 rule, but you can start with something simple and then build on it as people get used to working with the automated solution.
That's very cool. That's very, very cool. And we've seen it time and time again. And I have been involved in engagements with you, Sam, and a bunch of others where we run up against this wall of perfect being the enemy of actually getting any feedback or any good utilization. So that prototype perspective and getting something in the hands of business users that they can try and play with, but has that low sort of bar of expectation and then give feedback on, will beget a better solution and something that you couldn't have designed to begin with without that feedback. So that iterative approach, really leaning on the, I guess, agile product development side of the team that you guys work in, lends itself really, really well to getting great solutions and really quick business value. So I love that. Let's dig into some specific examples. I want to hear a little bit about how this practically works, maybe in some of your engagements, what this looks like. Not going to push you to reveal any trade secrets or anything like that, but I really want to see where the rubber hits the road for this part of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking to an engagement we've done recently, which was talking about automating a series of template letters for this particular team. And we did that proof of concept approach, right? And the other thing that was great about that was we actually had some of those team members become familiar with the Checkbox platform before we're rolling it out to the entire team. So the other thing about getting buy-in is you've got people in your team who are already Checkbox users before you're using this automation solution more widely, which can work really well. So after we were doing the proof of concept, we're looking at expanding this. The next step is of planning out what that iterative approach was going to look like. So we're very, very keen in this example to make sure that the team got access to an automated solution early. So, say you've got 8 different template letters, you can automate 8, and maybe it'll take like 3 months until they get a solution that they can work in, or you can break it up into 2 and they get, a month and a half down the track, a solution that they can work in, and then it gets added to in another month later. And that's great because they get earlier access to the benefits of the automated solution for their template documents. So, what we decided to do in this project was we broke it up into a couple of different tranches, right? So every 2 months, this team is getting additional templates within the app that they can work with. And it's really great in the sense that, like, it's easier to get buy-in when you're taking that approach because it's not so far down the track. And every time we release a new update, they've already experienced an automated world. Like they know what that looks like. So for them, it's just like having, okay, another one of our documents is in the app, and it works really well in terms of buy-in with a proof of concept. It worked really well in terms of having like the checkbox users or your early adopters within the team as well. They can help other people in the team when they start using the platform, and they get earlier exposure to the benefits of automation than if you decided to like automate everything at once and launch it like 6 months down the track.
From there, Sam, you mentioned some really interesting things. The early adopter pool, that's a really interesting group of people. How do you identify those? Does it come from people who the use case touches most frequently, or does it come from friendlies within the business who like working with the legal team? Like, how do you identify those early adopters?
I'm going to come with a really lawyer answer, which is it depends. So like it does change depending on the client and the use case, right? So your early adopters may come from frequent users of that use case. So people who are really heavily involved in the process. And we've had clients where we've literally helped them standardize their process with those key users. And then those key users who are involved in user acceptance testing of the automated solution, like involved really early and become those early adopters. But equally, we've also had early adopters who are, part of an identified group within the business, right? So say sometimes a lot of businesses have pushes towards automation, right? Like it becomes one of their strategic goals, increasing automation in the business. And so you might have someone within the legal team who's like the automation person for that goal of increasing automation in the business. And they become the person who is the early adopter and the early checkbox user in the platform.
Perfect. No, that makes lots of sense, and we're going to dive into that a little bit more, I think, as we talk through some of the how, like functionally, how to actually get this done. But before we do, I have a common objection to run by you, and I want to see how you've handled this in the past, which is the iterative process. Launching a couple of documents, requires a period of time for transition and change management. And often the feedback that we get is we'd actually just like to do it all at once. We'd like a clear cut for our change management. How do you talk about the ROI of doing the other way and doing the iterative approach journey? Because I know it works better, but it's a really, really complex thing to position. So how do you guys go about talking about that?
Yeah, so we talk about it in terms of it's basically a different approach in change management, right? So you go through your big one-off launch, you have your change management program to do with that launch, and you pre-train your change champions and they're helping out other people in the team versus having a constant change management and upskilling of the team. And that's what comes with the iterative approach, right? So for each round of development and launching, there's always user acceptance testing. So you start getting different people in the business involved in the user acceptance testing as you go through your use cases. And that's a constant change management approach, right? Because they have to upskill in the platform while they're doing the testing. They're the ones that get buying because they get to give feedback on the changes that they want to make to the automation solution as they go. And they're the ones training the rest of their team when it goes live. And that's happening consistently throughout the iterative build. So we often describe, this is your change management effort continues, rather than having like a one-off big change management approach. And we find that's more effective because you end up with your embedded checkbox users within the team who have those skills from the testing.
Beautiful. I think that summarizes it really nicely, and especially from what we're seeing on our side as well. If you do a one-off change management process, the buy-in, the efficacy of that change management is far, far lower than if you do it as this sort of piecemeal iterative approach, because you almost get an organic change management almost ethos delivered into the teams that start using this product. And it's really, really important with iterative improvement as well. So yeah, that all makes perfect sense. So Sam, I'm bought in. Sounds good. We've got the why, that's all sorted. The who and the what, we've identified some use cases, and we've thought a little bit about the business stakeholders. Maybe we've got a handful of early adopters, and we've thought about our change management process over this period that we're going to be implementing automation. How do we actually functionally get the buy-in from our stakeholders, and how do we functionally move some of these things forward? Because in concept, it feels really good. In practice, just the logistics of it scare me a little bit. So talk to me a little bit about what that looks like in your approach to how this all works together.
Yeah, so this is the part where you truly get to get things moving, right? And the great thing is, if you've done the who, you know who needs to be involved in getting things moving. And the first thing we usually do at this point is we'd set up what we call a requirements workshop. And what we're really doing here is digging into the detail of what needs to be in the automation solution for this use case, right? So what templates are we using, right? Who is the approver if we've got approvals involved? Who needs to sign documents, right? Like that might change depending on the templates that you're using. So you've got all of this detail that gets covered off and discussed with the people who need to be involved in the process in this workshop environment. And what you end up coming out of that is you've almost got your blueprint for here's the process within the app, here's what the workflow is going to look like. And you've also identified what your associated documents are going to be if document automation is part of it. And it's really interesting in terms of getting things started, because at that point, different teams may be at different levels of readiness to start building, and that's okay. But what you've actually done in that workshop is identify exactly practically what needs to be done to then be able to go, okay, we're going to build in Checkbox now. So like a really good example we had recently is we're automating templates within the Checkbox environment. And this team has got slightly different versions of the template documents because they sit nationally, right, in each state or within each leader of the team, right? So they went through, and we identified this as part of gathering the requirements in that workshop. And then there was a period of time where their steps for getting ready for automation was standardizing those templates across the entire team and being ready for that. And that's not effort lost, right? Like every team goes through at some point, a point in time where they need to standardize their process, or they need to standardize their precedents or their templates. And that's work that you'd probably want to do anyway, even if you weren't automating. So the fact that we go through this to then be ready to start building in Checkbox is like a really great step for the team, more broadly than just you need it to be able to start automating those documents and automating that process as well.
That's really cool. It's very, very similar, I guess, to what we're talking about a little earlier in the webinar, where we're not considering tools and we're not considering feasibility when we're looking at our processes and our stakeholders. We are becoming ready for automation and making sure that we are ready for a systematic approach to a process by making sure that that process is currently systematic. Different templates in every state sounds like there is already some sort of dark times friction that is causing some inability to automate, which is really, really interesting, I think. The dark times, actually, now that I mentioned it, is an interesting thing to talk a little bit about, because from a stakeholder buy-in perspective, we're looking at these processes and we're kind of finding out that maybe we're not as automation ready as we thought we were. How do you inspire and drive change to not just have this whole project popped in the bin? It's like, oh, actually, we can't automate this. What's the mechanism there to show the light at the end of the tunnel?
Yeah. If you're looking, and really it's starting small, right? So like simple answer up front, starting small, but looking at that practically, if you've got 8 template documents you want to automate, start with one. Don't go on the big project of standardizing all 8 before you start building. So start with one template. It can be the really simple one, right? Like the classic example is the NDA, confidentiality agreement, right? Like that, because it's a simpler document. There's also been some like wider work in the legal community around having standardized versions of those documents. So literally start with that one document, standardize it, and then start building, right? You don't have to have everything you do. And there's a lot that in-house legal teams do within their businesses, standardized and clear before you start building anything. So start with that one, pick the simplest, pick the easiest, get that ready and start building.
Awesome. No, that's perfect. What are some of the best places to start in terms of document categories or areas, if we're talking about documents in particular?
Yep. So I'd start with things that are just your document automation pieces. So, you might want to iterate your automation of your workflows, right? So like delegations of authority, approvals, e-sign, that might be something you want to do down the track. So great place to start is, what are your documents that are nice and simple? I've already flagged the confidentiality agreement. That's something that every business deals with, right? So it's a really common use case that we've seen things like sales team contracts, and that can vary as to what those look like across teams. But having those documents, you can start with, most organizations these days have a CRM that they use for that sales cycle. So that there's data that already exists within the business. So having a look at automating the sales contracts as well. But really, that's a huge bucket to begin with if you're talking about sales across all industries. We've also, if there's any template letters in your organization as well, so the kind of thing where you might need to mass produce or have multiple sets of documents with one piece of information, that can be a really good use case, right? Like, how annoying is it for us to have to copy the one set of information across 5 different template letters because there's slight variations, particularly in Australia. Usually we've got different states that we might have to deal with. Tax is a really good example of where that varies, right? So if there's a set of documents as well where you've got repeated information across those, that's also a really good starting point, because you're going to get so much value about having to enter information once to generate 5 different documents at once compared to copying the information.
Perfect. No, I think that makes really, really good sense. So, Sam, Let's talk retrospective on the how. Let's look backwards on some of your primary learnings and some of the biggest sort of knowledge nuggets that you've gotten from the, as I said before, hundreds of different engagements and apps that you guys have built.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first big thing is, I mean, everyone's heard of the 80-20 rule, but it's really important in terms of the learning. We, very early on, and particularly in the industry we work in, there is a sense to wanting to manage risk by having everything perfect up front, right? And that's what the legal industry is designed to do. So really keeping, we want to automate 80% of the process, or we want to get it 80% right, and that still delivers value, right? You don't want to spend all of your time automating for the 20% of the exceptions to your process. You will still get value from sticking to 80%. So that's sort of the first thing is, we've had really long app developments where we haven't been able to give value to clients as early as we would like because you're focusing on 100% of the process. So yeah, don't automate your exceptions. Keep it to the 80%. That's a first big one.
What is the downside? So we hear this a lot. It comes back to us and crystallizes in the statement, perfect is the enemy of good. Perfect will hold you up and it will do all sorts of negative things for your project. But what are the functional outcomes of trying to bite off the 100% first go?
First one is you don't actually get to use the automated solution for a much longer period of time, right? Like you want people to be using the efficient process or feeling some value in terms of speed and getting time back in their day. They don't get that for a much longer period of time, right? And when we talk about a business environment, you have to report back to what you're doing in an automation program. It's a lot longer period of time that you're not able to say, we've got this automated and we're delivering time back and value back to the business. So that's like the first major impact. The second one is that change management aspect. So, people want things quickly and you get buy-in from things quickly, right? Like the 20-second video is literally how people get addicted to TikTok, right? So it's the same sort of thing with the automation. If you're getting people's buy-in in the requirements workshop and you've left testing until the end and you're building for 4 months in between them because you're trying to solve for 100% of the process, all of those people who gave you all of that feedback on the requirements and who you would involve in the user acceptance testing have their heads out of it for 4 months, right? So you actually make it really hard from that change management perspective. Whereas if you're able to say, okay, we've done the requirements gathering, in 2 weeks, we're going to check in and we're going to show you what some of the build looks like. And then after another 2 weeks, you're actually going to go in the app and start testing out some elements of this, right? Like they're not having to think back to what they did 4 months ago and get their head back into what the automation solution looked like. So you really, really help speed up change management efforts as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. Just with the usage delay side of things, park change management for a section, because that is a can of worms which will definitely open up. But just adding an extra 2 months to how long it takes for your business users to actually get this brand new efficiency functionality into their hands reduces significantly the ROI on the entire project. So if you're looking at your finance team or your reporting teams, your leadership, and trying to justify effort, the easiest way is to get quick wins. 100% the 80-20 rule resonates really, really well there. On the change management side, we've talked about it a lot already, but I think that also makes really, really good sense. If I was to not use Zoom webinar as an example for 4 months, I'd forget where the buttons were. I'd forget where things are, and it's a relatively simple tool. So jumping into something which is maybe a little bit more bespoke or complex for your business, taking business users away for a long period of time is 100% counterproductive to change management. So that makes perfect sense there as well. Sam, before we jump into a really juicy misconception that I wanted to kind of unpack with you, have you seen any practical corner turn moments in your engagements, and sort of what triggered those from changing perceptions of perfect to perceptions of good?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been a really good, there's a few examples as we've gone through, but probably one more recently, we're talking about automating workflows that's like on the higher end of complexity. And, reiterating the benefits as we're going through testing in terms of you're already not having to manually duplicate this data. We're already getting like a full generated first draft of this document. And previously, thinking about feedback from user acceptance testing, things like, it's the formatting of, this particular part of the document, or, it'd be nice if all of this in the template, talking to the clients, standardizing their templates, right? At the start, actually it'd be nice if our template had all of this in, capitals and bolded all the way through, right? And that's, ideally, if you're standardizing your templates, you're having those discussions at the start, and the client turning point and going, no, that's okay, right? Like let's get this launched. That's not the bit. Like, we can update the template later, but right now we want to know that we're getting the data across into the documents, so we're not having to manually enter it, and we've automated our approvals, and things are going to e-sign. And it was a really good turning point with client that was like, actually, we can live with that, right? So you start to have clients go from, we're fixing every little thing, to identifying their own must-haves for being able to deploy this solution live, compared to, we're going to fix that later. And this is a should have, this is a nice to have. Like, they start to do that themselves instead of thinking with a mindset of 100% everything fixed.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. The little bits and pieces of improvements, it's really, really easy when you're going through this process and you're seeing the world of possibility to say, oh, can we do this? And oh, this would be amazing. And oh, can we throw this in here? And completely forgetting that we're coming from a past of 7 different states, 7 different templates, a whole bunch of different wording, and a whole bunch of different exposures in different jurisdictions that was accidentally evolved from the growth of our business. So it's really, really easy to lose sight on the 80% when you start to pick up this 20%. You start to get excited about the tooling and the possibility. And so tempering that, I think, is important, not dismissing it though. You don't want to ostracize your feedback. So getting those bits of feedback and parking them, launching, and then readdressing them. Which leads me, Sam, to a statement I want to hit you with, and I'm sure you're going to disagree with me. The statement is, once we finish this project, once we've got all 8 of our documents, templates automated, we're done. We can divert all of our change management effort and all of our resourcing and all of our budget to different things, because they're all freed up at the end of this project. That's right, isn't it, Sam?
No, because the great thing is, if you've identified all of your use cases, everyone's thinking about how they can do things better, right? So and this goes to wider transformation as well. Like once you've automated one workflow, everyone's going, oh, what else can we do better? Maybe this thing over here would be like a great candidate. So it never ends up just the one automation and that's it. Practically, right? There's always going to be discussions about what can we automate within our budget, within a financial year. But that's the great thing about identifying your use cases and prioritizing those into a roadmap, right? So you could go, here's our automation roadmap for the next 3 years. And here's the budget that can be allocated for year 1, year 2, year 3. And you've got all of your different use cases that you've prioritized aligned to those different budget buckets. And most businesses will have like not just a financial year budget, but they'll have a 3-year looking forward or a 5-year looking forward budget. So the great thing about taking that initial step is practically you can go, I want 3-year, 5-year budget for our automation roadmap, not just this one app, and we want to stop there. And that means that you can start to continue with those conversations around, well, can we do this better as well? Yeah, absolutely. It never stops there. And it's not just about new apps and new use cases as well. There's probably a whole bunch of things that you identified when you were going through, automating your 8 templates that you were like, oh, it'd be great if we could do this too, right? And that, like, we would call that in the agile world, like your backlog, right? But that's something that you can make a note of and look to iterate in the next financial year, where you can spend a bit more budget on making improvements to the existing app. And that's where you can continue that journey. So if we think about that 8 template example, the initial value and the focus was on generating first drafts of automated documents and getting, one set of information that applies across, all 8 documents entered into the app, getting those first drafts. Massive efficiency there already, right? But then as we go through, they think about, oh, we've got a document management system. And, usually the senior might review the first drafts of these documents before they get sent out to the clients. Oh, actually, can we also automate sending out the emails with the documents attached? And you've already got 2 additional further things that you could do in further developments of the app as well, right? So, okay, we've got this first draft of the documents. Let's push a copy to our document management system. And that's something that can be done in an automated world. And people can collaborate in the document management system. Or they could even do that within the Checkbox app, right? With the redlining features and things like that. Or we go, okay, actually what we want to focus on is the automated email aspect. So let's add that to our workflow. After we've generated the document that's been reviewed, let's push out these emails and enter the email address of the client. And that's something that all happens within the automated workflow. So yeah, it's not just the roadmap, it's also the roadmap with regards to making improvements or expanding the use of your existing automation solutions as well.
Very good, Sam. I stand corrected. I think that is quite an interesting point to like summarize and have as a bit of a capstone for this section, which is if you're doing this right, your journey doesn't end, and that's a very, very good thing. You're constantly getting more innovation, and you're constantly getting more improvements, and you're constantly getting more efficiency from the journey that you've started. And from all of that, obviously, talking to some of the budget holders in the webinar, there are massive financial benefits from proliferation in terms of the individual solve ROI. So really, 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 really interesting point there. This all goes really, really nicely back to the agile product methodology. That sounds hard. Is it something that's hard to instill in an in-house legal practice? If there's anyone on the webinar that has any questions about this, because I know I'm thinking about this a little bit as well. Our in-house legal practice, maybe we work the same way. And thinking about us as a product organization, that's a stretch. I don't know that we can do that. What does that process of change look like?
Yeah, so the wonderful thing about different project management methodologies, and this is coming from like my project management background, is that you don't have to adopt all of it to get some of the benefits of the agile methodology, right? So you don't have to say, we're going to adopt all of it. We're going to break down our projects this way. We're going to have Scrum Masters and everyone's going to be a certified Scrum Master. We're going to have product owners. We're going to have certified developers. Like, you don't have to adopt all of that. You can start with adopting things like the simpler agile ceremonies. So have a daily stand-up for your team. Okay, we've got this team who's looking after automation. Let's check in 15 minutes at the start of the day. What are our focuses? Like, what are we doing? Implementing retros is also a really simple thing to do. Okay, so say we've done this first 2 months iteration of an app build. Let's reflect together on how that's gone and what we might change for next time, right? A really simple thing to implement that's technically agile that you're bringing into the team. The other thing I'd say is implementing some of the testing, like slightly amended versions of how agile testing works. So often in agile methodologies, you've got testing together in person, so people checking each other's homework basically as you develop. You can implement a simpler thing while you're in your automation journey as well, right? And it's technically part of the agile methodology, but all you're doing is, okay, someone's gone in and done a build. Now let's get someone else in the team to quality check that and to do that review. And you're checking each other's homework and applying that testing methodology as well. So there's really simple things you can implement. Those are some examples. We, in our team, have the product owner and the Scrum Master role really clearly because there's a lot of projects and clients that we're working across at once. So we really need to make sure that the product owner is representing the voice of the client throughout the project. And we really need to make sure that, there is one person who's responsible for managing those daily ceremonies and for managing the timelines and pushing things forward. But I'd also say, like, implementing that testing approach has been really crucial for our team as well.
Talking through those rituals, a lot of them are very, very similar to common practice in in-house legal in any case. That sort of daily stand-up, checking in, what are our focuses, the whole idea of a retrospective, all that testing methodology sounds very much like a doc review to me. Yep. So it's really, really interesting how you might be, as a legal professional, far closer to innovation framing for automation than you realize. Which is definitely worth a conversation. Let's retrospective this entire webinar. I want to know where the nuggets are. I want to know your bits of advice and your must considers or your really important things. If you only took, say, 3 things away from this webinar, what would they be?
Yeah, so the first one, I'm going to stick with the 80-20 rule as the first one, right? Like, number one thing is don't solve for your exceptions, right? We want to automate the 80%, not 100% of the process. I think I've covered that one in a lot of detail. I think the second one is really focusing on that rolling or iterative approach to building, right? So make sure you've done that use case identification and prioritization exercise. You know what you're going to address as you build. And we're starting with the quick wins, the little bits, and then we continue to build as we go. So, that rule of 1 template every 2 months instead of 8 templates in 6 months. Keep that in mind as you structure how you're going to approach automation within the team. And the last one, there's been elements of this that we've spoken to throughout the webinar, but a way to think about this one is think about what the operations look like for having an automated world. And what I mean by that is make it part of your BAU. How are you going to build so it's part of your BAU? And that's things like we're going to have people who are Checkbox users and early adopters so they can help train new team members. We're going to think about how we report to different parts of the business so we can make sure our reporting needs are covered as part of the app build. We're going to think about how we're going to do ongoing changes to the app and continue that iteration as part of our build so it becomes part of our BAU, right? So, and that's all of the things that go with that, like having engagement from your ICT team. Are they going to support this moving forward? Or are you going to build out a citizen developer function within your team who are going to support those ongoing changes? Do you want external support for that, right? Like, is there a managed service option as well that can help with ongoing support? So all of that is about the operations and making automation part of your BAU.
Wow. Yeah, I'm going to let that sit for a moment, because I think if you were to take one thing away from this webinar, that might be the one. Making, and it goes without saying, but if you don't, what is the consequence? What are the risks if this isn't part of a BAU consideration?
You've developed an app that doesn't get used, right? Or you end up with an automation solution where you don't have the support for it. And not having that support means that you don't get to make those awesome iterative changes to it, and you don't get to address other use cases. It becomes a one-off project that no one uses. So like, it's really important, you know, when we talk about you're going to get return on investment because you're saving X hours per app use overall, you're talking about app use in terms of your BAU. So you're never going to deliver on that ROI or estimated ROI without making it part of your BAU.
Yeah, that's really cool. And for the engagements that you've worked in where they have made it part of their BAU, what does the end state look like? I'm not going to call it nirvana because it's a continuous journey, but what does that end state look like?
The end state is ultimately a more efficient process day to day. And that sounds really broad and high level. But if I think about it another way, right, we recently had a client who had automated their sales contracting process, and it's part of their BAU, right? Like every day they're automating these contracts through a Checkbox app every day. And they had a new contract that we needed to build in the platform, but they had to start using it straight away. So all of a sudden, they're used to this automated world for their sales contracts, and they've got this new one that they're having to do manually drafting, managing manual signatures through email chains, managing approvals through email chains. And so in that example, it was like understanding what their world used to be compared to what their world is now, because they have a BAU automated solution as part of that process. So it really looks like an easier world for the team. And it was more that they realized how much their world had changed because they had to go back to the old one for a new contract. So yeah, it's really it should be done correctly, an easier process and an easier world for a business.
Amazing. Sam, thank you. Thank you. This session has been invaluable. And next webinar, we will discuss your fencing and all of the fencing side of things. It's going to be thrilling. And that is obviously a joke, unless we get enough interest, and I will run a bespoke fencing webinar with you, Sam. Thank you all for today has been wonderful. Sam, your advice resonates really, really strongly. And I think across the number of engagements, it's really crystallized into some really good action steps to doing this sort of thing properly. Thank you so much for your time and attendance, everyone. We will see you in the next one.
Thank you, everyone.
See you all later.